So, I guess the last thing to do for this before we sign off on this character series is to go over my build and what I really think about the certain skills and leveling them up. So, I've got a maxed out kunai throw first of all. The reason that I've got this maxed out is that it helps very, very greatly with applying the explosive tag onto your enemies when you need to hit them. It does physical damage, which is very helpful, especially against those anti-magic assholes. And it's on a super short cooldown. It's super, like 1.2 seconds. Every second you can do that. It does good damage on itself, and it pierces enemies, applying that explosive tag to each one. Pretty good skill overall. Pretty good. I really like it. Because of just how low cooldown it is in a big way. Let's see. I want to make special mention of a couple of skills that I don't really have leveled up. We got our Fire Art Fireball right here. This particular skill I'm not the biggest fan of, but I certainly see some of its merits. The reason I'm not a huge fan of it is it has to sit there and do damage over time, as opposed to just popping a big chunk of damage right away, which is pretty much the point why... that's the main point about why I've got TP into Spiral Wheel Kunai, which we'll get to later. But at the same time, it does level up pretty nicely. It gains some pretty decent damage overall, but I don't think it's quite worth it. I think it gets outshined by other skills, and not saying it's a bad skill, it's just beaten by a few others. And I also want to mention Flying Squirrel. If you have your Shadow Clone maxed out along with Flying Squirrel, and you just spam this on something, you will do an insanely high amount of damage to it. The issue being that its base damage and its applications are specifically for single target, whereas almost everything else here is AoE. But hey, if you Flying Squirrel into a boss and you just spam the crap out of that button, you're going to murder that boss pretty quick. So it's not a bad idea if you're doing specific dungeon runs or anything like that. Anything's kind of gimmicky. Multi-Illusion Shuriken, I got maxed out. This thing does insane amounts of damage, bounces around between enemies, and just crushes health bars, especially if you're able to just knock it all into one or two enemies. They will die very quickly, and on top of it all, it applies the explosive tag to the enemies that you hit, meaning they're going to explode later on. Pretty nice overall. Okay, Fire Art Crimson Flare, you wanna max this out 100%. You wanna max this out. Why do you want to max this out? Well, it buffs all of your attack skills. It reduces some of the damage you take. If you're having a little trouble taking hits, it helps out with that. And it just it makes clearing a lot easier because of how powerful it is. Kunai Mastery, I've got this maxed out. I mean, this gives you a little bit of bonus physical damage overall, and it lowers the cooldown of your other skills, namely your the Kunai Throw, let's talk a little better. Kunai Throw, Multi-Illusion Shuriken, and Spiral Wheel Kunai all get a cooldown reduction on this, which is very, very nice. I mean, look at that, 54% lower cooldown reduction on Kunai Throw, 25% on Multi-Illusion Shuriken. That's pretty nice. That's a couple seconds being shaved off of these skills, so you can use them more often, and very helpful. Flame Tornado, we got this maxed out. Of course you're going to max this out. This is your grouping skill. You throw it through enemies, it pulls them in. The higher level it is, the more damage it does, and the longer it lasts, I believe, as well. Lower cooldown, all that stuff. Very good skill to max out. One of the better ones. It's a very powerful grouping skill. Definitely max that out. Next up, we've got Spiral Wheel Kunai. I've got this maxed out. This is a very short cooldown overall, especially if you're maxing out your Kunai Mastery, as I've done. And you can use it, I mean, look at that. The cooldown 13.2 seconds with Kunai Mastery maxed out, and the Flame Tornado cooldown at 12.6 seconds, so they're almost up at the exact same time as each other. So it's a very good combination to tornado them together and then blast their asses off with the spiral wheel kunai. Ninpo Decoy, I've got this maxed out. Why do I have this maxed out? Well, let's look at the damage. Look at those percentages. That's why I have this maxed out. That is some insanely high damage and pretty damn good scaling overall for something that just that's meant to be a counterattack kind of defensive measure. I use this offensively all the time. Ninpo Decoy, extremely powerful. Highly recommend maxing that out. If you guys want to use it more defensively, you can throw those points into one of the more offensive skills that I don't necessarily have maxed out myself, though. Shadow Clone, got this maxed out. You max that out, you get more max Shadow Clones, your attack rate goes up, the recovery time. Very good to have this maxed out, because you want to be able to spam your spells as fast as possible in order to power up the skill that goes into the Ninpo Cycles of Eternity, which just records the last X number of skills that you've used. At the last 6 skills that you've used, it'll record them, it'll replay them back out in whatever direction you're facing, and it'll be a fully charged shot for each one of them. So you want to have those Shadow Clones available for that. The higher level your Shadow Clones are, the higher level the more powerful they are when they explode, which helps a lot with Ninpo Cycles of Eternity, because a Shadow Clone casts each and every one of those skills that you use. Heavenly Fire Blast, I got this maxed out. Very powerful, relatively spammable, very short cooldown, 18.9 seconds right here at level 26. That's very low. Very hefty damage. I mean, look at those percentages. Nice. And you get some bonus attack if you grab an enemy with it. Pretty cool. Toad Oil Bomb, max this. I don't care what your build is, max this. Don't question it. Just thoughtlessly throw points into this as if you're just throwing coins into a wishing well and wishing to become rich. And then suddenly you find a pile of money behind you. Toad Oil Bomb will never do you wrong. It is insane. You can drop it from the sky, and it's really good. You can, if you full charge it, it clears just an entire room in front of it, pretty much. It does a ridiculous amount of damage, just so much damage, coming out of the explosions it spits out, and its own explosion upon appearing and disappearing. Super good skill. One of the best in the game, easily, for just annihilating rooms. Dark Shadow, I've got this maxed out because you throw it and attach an explosive tag onto stuff whenever you hit with a kunai throw, or when you hit with multi-illusion shuriken. I use those skills very often, so I make use of the explosive tags often enough for this to be useful. Now, it doesn't do the most damage in the world, but you mark them for death and you do extra damage every time past that. So on top of that, you got that extra assassination target. So very good, very nice. Helps out a fairly good bit. Also reduces fire resistance. And you want to reduce fire resistance. Why? Because you do fucking fire damage with everything. Secret Art Blazing Blossom. The Blazing Blossom is really, really good. This one's on a bit of a longer cooldown, so you can argue against leveling it up fully. But, I mean, you charge it up, and then you throw out another skill right afterwards, and you just let your Shadow Clone finish it. And if you put a point and TP on it, it will teleport around the room, grab a bunch of stuff together, and group for you. It becomes a grouping skill if you put 1 point in the TP upgrade, which costs 2 TP. But if you're willing to put that in, it becomes a rather good grouping skill, and it'll even one thing it'll do that's very nice is it'll pull enemies that are flying out of the sky towards the ground for you if you're having some trouble with those, as long as you have that point in the TP skill. I mean, your Awakening's going to level itself no matter what, so I'll just go over this for anyone that may have a little trouble on how to use this. Your Awakening is going to fire off about half a screen in front of wherever you're facing is where your Awakening's actually going to plant you, and where the main damage is going to get. Your Awakening does have a very good pool on it, so it's going to pool a heavy amount of the room, even if you throw it a little bit off target, but it's not perfect. It's not going to pull the entire room into the center of your explosion, so be careful about aiming it a little. Burning Stigma, I got this maxed out. Why do I have this maxed out? Because it's like wave radiation from an Asura almost. It just does damage, damage, damage as long as you're near enemies, and it'll keep doing damage on them until they eventually explode and take a big chunk of damage on top of it. On top of all of that, they reduce fire resistance on any enemy that is affected by it. So not only are they taking fire damage, but they have lowered fire resistance. And once again, you do fire damage. Lots and lots of fire damage, so this is rather helpful for ya. And finally, we've got the last two skills, Flying Shuriken. This is a good grouping skill. It will group ground and air enemies alike, pull them across the X and the Y axis, more pull on the X than the Y, throw them onto the ground, and then you will throw a bunch of kunai down on top of them. This is... I've played around with it a little bit to see how decent it is to level up. It's okay, but I think it falls a little bit flat compared to plenty of other skills I have 1 point in it. It's a really good grouping skill, and you can even use it as a kind of a counter skill because for a couple seconds, while you at the startup of this, you are completely untargetable and cannot be damaged while you throw this out. Important to note about that. Same with early on in Nimpo Decoy. Right away, you're a little bit untargetable, can't really take damage for a short period of time, so if you can time those right, you can be very, very difficult to kill. And last but not least, we've got the Spiral Flame Shuriken. Now this can do a fairly good amount of damage. The only issue I have is that it's very, very difficult to properly aim it onto an opponent. If you're using this on the ground, as you can see in the little preview up there, you're going to throw out 1, then 2, then 3, but they're going to kind of curve around the room, so you're not really getting optimal damage by leveling this, and a lot of enemies don't just sit there and take it, like the example enemies that they're showing there. A lot of enemies that you're going to want to actually use this this kind of skill, you know, a big clear cube skill on, they're going to move around the room a lot more, they're going to try and attack you a lot more, and they're going to make life a lot more difficult with using this. However, the strength can come from this, where if you throw this from the air, it will slam straight into the ground with the 3 shuriken right away and cause a pretty big explosion, dealing pretty nice damage. And if you record it with Nimpo Cycles of Eternity, you can just have a Shadow Clone do the cast for you perfectly fine. I've had some issues with having a Shadow Clone actually cast it when I just want to cast it, so seems like it's got a couple of its own issues, but it's not a very bad skill. It does pretty decent damage. I think it outshines Flying Shuriken by just a little bit, and big enemies are a lot easier to hit, so definitely abuse that on the larger enemies. And going over to TP, I mean, I would mention, you know, Quick Rebound and Focus Magic Critical, but those should be standard. You guys should know this. You don't need me to tell you that. And Aerial Jump, you know, the double jump, it helps out. Okay, going on to the TP skills, we'll take a look at this. Max out Fire Art Crimson Flare. Why do you max out Fire Art Crimson Flare? Because Fire Art Crimson Flare increases the damage of all of your skills. Every single skill. It doesn't matter what your skill is. All of your skills will do more damage. That's why you max it out. Next up, we've got Spiral Wheel Kunai maxed out. Now, Spiral Wheel Kunai is very interesting on its TP uses. So, for every level of TP, Spiral Wheel Kunai will spin less and get to its bigger explosion a lot sooner. See multi-hit reduction rate per level 20%, bonus explosion attack per level 150%. So what that means is the final explosion becomes much, much more powerful, and the multi-hit of it becomes less and less. So what you're doing is you're sacrificing the little damage over time to get to the large explosion at the end. At max level, what it does is Spiral Wheel Kunai doesn't have any multiple hits. It just throws out and explodes immediately. Why is this good? Because lots of enemies can just charge through Spiral Wheel Kunai and ignore it. Whereas if you throw it out and it just plain explodes, they're going to take a couple bars of health worth of damage. And Spiral Wheel Kunai is very powerful when fully maxed out. Highly, highly recommend maxing this, guys. Highly recommend. Next, I got a point in Heavenly Fire Blast. Why do I have a point in Heavenly Fire Blast? Because it adds the ability to pick up a single enemy in midair. What this does is this grabs an enemy. It'll take you straight up, and instead of firing your blast in a diagonal fashion, it'll instead do an Izuna drop, turn around, do a big flaming spin straight into the ground and explode him onto the ground, which is not only fucking sick to watch and so cool, but it's honestly generally more effective to have you plant that straight down into the ground. Now, this doesn't mean that it's always going to work that way. Sometimes you're not going to pick up the enemy, and sometimes you're just going to fire straight out in a diagonal, in which case, okay, you fire it out in the diagonal like you would have normally. I have a point in Impost Cycles of Eternity. I'm still kind of debating this. The reason I do is because this makes everything that you do when you record stronger. I'm kind of wishy-washy on whether to do that or just to keep Toad Oil Bomb upgraded all the way. Toad Oil Bomb makes it stronger. That's it. It just makes it stronger. And Toad Oil Bomb being stronger is what you want, because it's such an insanely good skill. So the more power it has, the better. So maybe I'll just leave it like this. It seems to work so far. And finally, 1 point in Secret Art Blazing Blossom. The reason you have this is it adds the ability to pull enemies to your location. By pull enemies to your location, or at least what I've seen, is it will teleport you 2 enemies across the screen and then teleport them onto your location and then burn the shit out of them. One very good combination you can do is if you have this, if you have a single point in this and a single point in Heavenly Fire, then you can use the Blazing Blossom. It will teleport around the room, pulling enemies together, and then when they're together on the ground, so it will, once again, it pulls out sky enemies to the ground. And then you can throw in a Heavenly Fire Blast right afterwards, and it'll grab one of them, and Izuna drop them right onto that area where all the enemies are grouped. Very good combination. And that's what I use, that's my setup, that's kind of what I strived towards throughout the entire playthrough. I had a short period of time where I'm like, ooh, Fireball's pretty good, I'll try it out a little bit, but I wasn't such a big fan of it. Everything else, though, I've pretty much stayed standard throughout the whole playthrough. Kunai has been maxed, Multi-Illusion Shuriken has been maxed, Flame Tornado and Spiral Wheel. And if you guys are looking to level up Kunoichi, you're looking for a skill build, here's a pretty good skill build for tackling the game itself, even up towards the later game. Still, question a couple of things. Spiral Wheel Shurikens, maybe change it up. Flying Shuriken, maybe get some points. Who knows? Still got a couple things I got to test out, but for now, this is a pretty good build, very efficient. You might run out of mana a little bit towards the end if you aren't geared properly, like I have been throughout my whole run. But you do enough damage that you should be able to take this build through any dungeon on the main level up route, basically, especially, and even through any and all epic quests. This stays a very good build. Except maybe Mount Kunrun. Haven't really done too much there. But anyway, that's the end of the Kunoichi Level Up series. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. Thank you everyone who came out, whether you came out to watch the whole series or came out just to watch this skill build that I put together for you guys. And hopefully it treats you all well. Hopefully you all go out there, and if Kunoichi really interests you, you like blowing stuff up and creating massive fireballs of death all over the place, this is the class for you, because you explode the screen pretty often. Get out there and blow shit up, guys. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye, everybody.